right. Just pinging the team, seeing who's coming, who's not coming. And thanks, everyone. I see more people are rolling out. There's Proto. All right. Invite to stage. Hey, Proto. I'm not sure if Chris is going to make it. I know he was in a few meetings. Got a lot to do here with the finalizing of some of the contracts and UI of the next phase of the test net. So that should be super exciting. Just to just to confirm, Proto, you can hear me, right?
Yep, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Cool. Yep. I've been testing out, new recording software and things like that. I have not quite got it dialed in, so I've reverted to my old ways for this one, and hopefully next week I'll have a improved system. But we'll give another minute or two, see if others are going to roll in, and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right. Well, I think Chris and some of the team might be in a meeting still. So I'll just go ahead and get started without them. And when they roll in, if they roll in, great. So first off, thanks everyone for coming. We've got some fun stuff to talk about today, and we'll just go ahead and start, dive into that. Test to Earn Phase 2 is going to be happening relatively soon. We don't have an exact date yet. We still have some finalizing on our part that we need to do. But if you want concrete details on what's happening, go ahead and check the announcements channel and you can read that. But overall, what is happening is that next testnet phase is going to include bridging from L1 to L2 and L2 to L1, minting of asteroids on L2, Adalian recruitment, which is essentially the flow in which you will be able to create new Adalians, which is going to be super exciting. Sergey, I see you're here there. We'll dive into that in just a moment. And then the crew management user interface, so slotting in crewmates, assigning a captain, inspecting details, roles, jobs, all of that is coming in the next phase. And then, that'll be the next phase. And then after that, we'll have travel and things of that nature, along with probably some lot interactions. So no dates on that either, but that's kind of the timeline or roadmap for features that are going to be rolled out. I think I want to maybe pass it over to Sergey if you'd like. Maybe talk about a little bit about just the Adalian minting that you've created the UI for, and maybe that crew management screen. Just give them a little inside details about the inner workings of how that was created and what they have to look forward to.
Yeah, sounds good, dude. Indeed, Adalian minting and the overhaul of the owned crew screen is a big part of something that we wanted to test. The core feature set behind that is that we want people to be able to create as many crew as they want. This is not limited to the original kind of like starter set of the people that came aboard the Arvad, which have their own like stats and bonuses. But basically, the lore point of view is the first generation of Adalians who just graduated from Adalian College from their technical schools, and it's a new crop of miners, engineers, scientists, etc. That you can recruit to come aboard, and eventually there'll be the flying spaceships for you aboard your crew. The sort of mechanics behind that. Again, to recap, the basics are you have 5 crew members, including 1 captain, and they will determine the kind of starting set of stats and the starting sets of what your account is going to be good at. And you will have an unlimited amount of basically crew that you can station in reserve. They could be hanging out at a habitat somewhere on the planetary surface. They could be just inactive, drifting in a hab module or something like that. But the idea is 5 active at a time, any number of inactive, and then you can kind of mix and match. So you'll be able to activate any number of scientists, engineers, etc., and see what effect that has on your total crew composition. And it's worth noting the total crew composition right now is just going to give you a base set of characters and a base set of percentages for the types of jobs that they'll be doing better. We won't have a full stat panel until we actually launch full activities in the game, but you'll be able to see what happens when you slot in like three scientists, 2 engineers, etc. In preparation, I hope, for doing stuff with your crew. Let's see what else. The blockchain mechanics behind it are we decided to have this kind of a dirty state for the crew, the active crew 5, which means that on that screen you can manipulate to your heart's content. You can go in, out, you can deactivate any number of members, and then once you hit save changes, then that consists of blockchain transaction where you kind of crystallize that set of crew changes. Then you do your blockchain transaction. You pay the gas fees to save the crew then, and then you can do that as many number of times as you want, of course. But each time will constitute a new transaction that will be chained on to your wallet account. I'd say that covers pretty much the basics. I'm excited. This is like a brand new StarkNet L2 functionality too. It's like really kind of the first step that we're taking with functionality that we want to test out on just purely the beginnings of playing the game on StarkNet. It is the ability to recruit new crew. Now you can own and recruit crew without owning an asteroid, and you can just have your 5 crew members named, recruited, and ready to go for when we launch new functionality down the line.
Yeah, thank you, Sergey, for giving people, kind of the details and the inner workings of that. I think it's going to be really exciting for people to finally be able to get into the game and click around a bit more than purchasing an asteroid and scanning it. So I think you're going to start to feel quite a bit of depth there. And then with features after that rolling out, with travel and a lot of interactions, it's really going to start to feel like a full game, in short order. I'm curious, Sergey, if you want to share a little bit about what you're working on besides, this, what's going on with the test net. I know you've been kind of diving into more 3D mechanics and things like that, and I'd love to give people maybe just a glimpse into that.
Oh, sure. I mean, this is a great actual segue to give a shout out to Proto here, who I've been working with, who has done a bang up job putting essentially a chemistry textbook into the game. It's so cool. A big part of what I'm doing right now is we're kind of finalizing the resource list. So we have the whole resource chains, and I'm working on basically helping art direct, and we have an outsource studio that we're working with who's delivering all these awesome game models for us that are going to go in the resource list. And as I'm going through these, I'm just overjoyed. I hope it's as nerdy for you guys as it is for us, because I've played there's so many games with complex crafting trees, but they just make stuff up, right? They just kind of have to, because it's a fictional world. They can make up whatever you want, like however many like planks of wood and iron ingots will build your like furnace and stuff like that. But here I am, like figuring out how to concept stuff like neodymium chloride salt which, by the way, is it's realistically leached out of neodymium ore, which Noah has figured out is realistically leached out of ore that's one of the base raw materials through chemical processes that are well defined, that exist in the 21st century, and all these stuff. It's so I'm so giddy thinking about it that all this stuff has like a real life counterpart, and we're trying to do like real molecular structures wherever possible on these item icons to just kind of show people that if you want to go down that rabbit hole and Google any of our resources, there is like this whole fascinating world of how they're used in real life today in chemistry, to create awesome high tech stuff such as circuit boards and computers eventually that we have. It's just one of the coolest textbooks in a game I think I've ever worked on, and I'm stoked to bring that to fruition. Hopefully sooner than later. We want to have we're looking at right now an upgraded item viewer. For those of you guys that like the secret shift space to see the little tiny item viewer in our client right now. You can see the resources that we have. We've basically tripled or quadrupled that count already, and we're going to put those new ones in. And we were talking about showing it in a much larger, like full screen full screen viewer with a tooltip that will explain little by little what all these resources are used for. And eventually we want to hook in formulas, and eventually it's going to be the whole, like in-game encyclopedia. But that is a section of what I'm working on. I'm also I'm conducting a bunch of tests that will basically prove out how our 3D models will be visible in the game engine, which is 3JS. And just kind of developing our pipelines with Will right now, with Will, our art director, for how we go from models that we do in high poly, we create them in Blender, and how we eventually deconstruct them into game ready models, and how they'll be seen through the game camera when the game camera can focus on more things than just a single asteroid at a time. You'll be able the asteroid will be subdivided into plots. You'll zoom in on a plot. That plot will contain buildings. Each building you'll be able to further zoom in. Each building will contain resources. So there are lots and lots of really, really cool zoom levels that this should allow, and we're trying to figure out how our 3D models fit into that paradigm right now.
Yeah, I think it's been a fun and long and windy road so far. We've got a lot more to tackle, but it's pretty incredible to see all this stuff actually start to fall into place, and all the mechanics and everything that we've had kind of separate now having to be joined, and thinking about that in terms of the contracts and how the mechanics are actually going to work. If anyone's paying attention to the owner's lounge, if you've got an asteroid that you own, there was some pretty fun discussion just yesterday between Proto, myself, and a few others that are really just diving into the nuances of how these things work with smart contracts and being on the blockchain. And this is new territory. This is brand new technology that we're pioneering here for this game, and we're gonna do our absolute best, and we're gonna have an epic game. And this technology that we build into this game is likely going to be then taken by many others in the future of how you actually do these things, and hopefully we can bring the masses to Starknet, Ethereum, and blockchain gaming in general. So it's a big task, like no trying to skirt around that, but it's really all starting to fall into place, and I'm just really excited about it. Proto, I know you've been working on a lot. Is there anything you want to share with the community?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, as Sergey mentioned, we've been working, they mostly, he and Will have been working on the icons for the materials. So I've been sitting on some of the meetings for the buildings and for those icons when we discuss what sort of constitutes realism for them. a really interesting push and pull, I have to say. Like every time we talk about that art, there's sort of the tendency to like make it look as cool as possible and as flashy and really awesome, and then there's sort of the tendency to like, what would this really look like if they were building this thing, in reality? And sometimes it's like push and pull, and sometimes it just like really is a perfect synergy. Sometimes it goes, and oh, like the form really would look awesome, and let's lean into that. So I've been sitting on those meetings and really enjoying those discussions with the art folks. I've been in Neo4j, analyzing production chains, trying to sort of parse out which parts of them might need a little bit of tweaking. Haven't really come to any firm conclusions yet, but I think there are a few tweaks I'm probably going to be wanting to make. The biggest news that I have to share actually is that as of the past 2 weeks, we have confirmed that we are getting a new building, which is very, sort of tentatively called the farm. It's basically the building where things that you want to grow that need lots of sunlight, things like plants, things like bacterial, colonies, things maybe like, algae, maybe fungus. This is a lot of that's sort of in the future, the sort of like different types of plants and different types of things that you might grow. But for right now, what we want for the farm to do is to basically provide a sort of grown algae slash maybe soybeans source for our food. The chain that we have for food will be changed around a little bit. So currently the way it works is that you combine like the soil and the fertilizer in the factory to get your food item directly. And that didn't feel very realistic to us, just like this, building with robotic arms in it, somehow putting fertilizer and dirt together into food, like didn't quite follow. So we've got this farm now, and so I think the plan is for there to be, and I've been working on this again in the past 2 weeks, is for there to be probably a few different types of fertilizer, sort of as there are in real industrial, agronomy. Like you've got sort of, like your nitrogen, your phosphorus, your potassium, maybe some sulfur, like various, maybe carbon, like sort of basic elements that go into growing plants and algae and bacteria. And so some of those already exist in our production. In fact, all of them exist in our production chains in various forms, and we just need to sort of create some different fertilizers than just a single one, which had that was a basic nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus fertilizer was the one that we already had all three of them. And I think we're going to sort of split that out a little bit more so that you can have more control over what goes into growing something in the farm. But yeah, so you use those fertilizers and soil if it's a growing plant like soybeans. Or not, water if it's an algae that's grown hydroponically, and those together will create a biological output like soybeans or like spirulina algae, and so that would be taken to the factory and turned into food. So there's a slight increase in the number of steps for food, but the really big win that we've got with this farm is that it allows us to simplify a lot of the production chains for more complicated organic compounds that we currently were like literally producing via the industrial chemistry processes. So for example, if any of you have dug into the production chain viewers that the community has been really kicking it out of the park with recently, you would have seen that the polymer tantalum capacitor that we've got, which is a critical component of circuit boards, which goes into computers, which is in every advanced piece of technology in the game. The polymer tantalum capacitor has a pretty complicated production chain for the polymer P-dot, which is featured in it. It's this really cool conducting polymer that is necessary for that type of capacitor. And so what we're going to do is we're actually going to have a bacteria be bioengineered to produce that. And so what that lets us do is just have a few of those basic fertilizer inputs and some water and put it into the farm or whatever we end up calling it, and out comes that advanced organic compound just in one fell swoop. So I think that's going to actually allow us to simplify some areas that I was not particularly happy with in the production chains that were overcomplicated just to get us to a particular technology that needs it in real life. And I think it makes for a really good fit there. And I've talked to Chris about sort of future plans for the farm. I think we're going to probably have a lot of fun with that building in the future, especially with discovery. Food is such a simple mechanic right now, but you can imagine that there might be different types of food that have different bonuses, or there might be, different compounds that we want to produce in that farm, different types of food. Maybe there's cooking, heck, that features as a whole job class in the RBOD. So, maybe that has some tie-ins there to making different types of food. So I think we have a lot of avenues to grow with the farm in the future. But for right now, we're just getting it into the game for exploitation so that you guys can build that building, and it will be there, when in the future when we have more stuff to add to it, and it will actually solve some production chain problems that we are having right now with overcomplexity with some of the components. I'm really excited for that, and we're gonna, it's the last building. It just got added, so we're gonna do the concept art for it. I think, pretty close to the end of the overall process for designing buildings. But I'm super excited to see that. Like, I was talking to Chris, and we're both like, green is both of our favorite colors, and just like that splash of green across the surface of asteroids is going to be such a like touch of home, a touch of Earth. Like that's the green Veritas like spreading across the galaxy that humans have brought with them. So I'm super excited for that. But yeah, that's probably the big news for the past 2 weeks for me.
That's awesome. Hey, side prompt for you, Proto. Are you planning on using tardigrades at all as those
They're having a moment, aren't
as
they?
any part of the biomechanical process? It's
all-
just such a cool creature.
It's such a
I
good
hope
creature,
we
yeah.
can find room for it.
Yeah, they live on moss, I think, in reality, in little water droplets in moss. Maybe there's sort of like sea monkey pellets or something. There's a tardigrade pellet that you can put in, and it increases the productivity of your farm or something. But I'll have to think about that one.
They like famously go into a dry state in
Right.
vacuum,
They do.
and they could be kind of like hauled across on, I don't know, the outside of spaceships to.
Maybe they're the packing peanuts for our stuff on the ships. You just have billions of tardigrade tons as your packing peanuts. Yeah, I think they might be in line after.
How about a tardigrade sandwich?
That's our tartar sauce. Oh God. Yeah, and I wanted to bring up one other thing too. We've said it a few times, and I think just reiterating it a few more times is important. But we got notice from StarkNet. They've made public announcements around their release date of kind of the needs that we need, and they're looking at probably end of November. It looks like. So our game can't launch without that. And then after they fully launch, then there's quite a bit of testing that needs to go in, and just making sure that all of the things that we've built are actually going to work properly with what they release. So for roadmap purposes, we don't have a timeline that we can say this is the time we're going to release, but just know that we're doing everything that we can so that when StarkNet releases, we release as soon as we possibly can after that, and that looks November on. Sorry, brother, do you want to say something?
Yeah, actually, we've got a question from Nathrax here about the farm greenhouse. I'm asking, is soil reusable? And that actually brings up a good point that is another thing that has sort of come up in the past couple of weeks. It's regarding process modules. Chris and I and several of the other team have been sort of pondering on what the best way forward with those is. As they are designed in the exploitation guide that you guys have all read, they're basically like an item that you can craft in one of the production buildings, like the factory or the refinery. And you take several inputs, you craft it, and then it sits in that building and lets you produce a particular output for however many cycles the process module has, like 10 or 20 or whatever cycles, and then it goes away and you have to rebuild it. Or you can take it out of the building and sell it as a separate item, as its own standalone item. And I think we've kind of rethought that mechanic somewhat for a variety of reasons. We really like the idea of making a building be specialized, making it with like a process module would do, which is making it produce a particular output that it couldn't produce otherwise. We really like that and want to keep that. I think what direction we are going though for that mechanic is that a building may require a process module. Many things you can make with a building might actually not require one, because the building actually already has everything it needs to make that. For example, the refinery should have everything it needs just in default state to refine tainite into iron or into nickel. And I think, but there's a lot of more specialized things that you might want to make that, maybe need a catalyst or maybe need a special, sort of pump system or a special handling system or whatever. And in those cases, you would need to still install process module type components. Again, which is not going to be super complicated. It's not going to be like you need 50 different things. It's more like here's 1 or 2 or 3 different, specialized things you might need to install in this building to do that. So some may require it, some may not, and we're thinking that they will no longer be removable. You install them in a building, and then they will be in that building forever until you remove them, if you choose to remove them, basically, which would delete them entirely. So it's no longer a tradable good. We were just thinking that made things a lot more complicated in terms of we would have to make another 250 different icons for these process modules that we don't actually want to do at all. And B, like it actually is a kind of a good mechanic to just make you decide when you take a building of like what kind of factory do I want this to be, what kind of refinery do I want this to be, and maybe you leave it sort of as a stem cell, it's a factory that doesn't have a process module and it can do several different things that it can just do by default. But maybe you've also turned it into a more specialized version of that building, and then it actually becomes more useful for that particular production chain. And again, you can wipe out that sort of specialization for the building and just return it back to that normal state. But we don't think that you're going to be able to get an actual process module out of it. Like that would just delete whatever materials you would use to specialize it.
Yeah.
And leave it in free form for you to specialize it again if you wanted to or not. But so yeah, this simplifies the overall game in certain ways. It still keeps the interesting aspect of process modules, which is that degree of specialization that you need to do sometimes when you're making something that is a more specialized output. And it just saves us a lot of time with the art for the modules. And yeah, it makes it into a decision you just sort of make a little bit less casually. It's like, okay, I want to make this building be making iron or whatever it is. Lithium batteries or whatever. And so I'm going to install that module and that's what it's going to make until I decide to switch around to something else in the future. So to your question, Athrex, about the soil, I think in a farm greenhouse in the context, if you're growing, say, soybeans, I think soil, since it's something that's not actually consumed by growing soybeans, it's just sort of a substrate that you grow it on. I think that may actually be part of the process module for, say, soybeans. You would take the soil and put it into your farm, and now it can produce soybeans, whereas before it couldn't. And it's good to go for making soybeans as long as you want to, until you decide to take that soil out of it and throw it away. And then you could maybe, build it up, turn it into something that can make algae or PDOT or whatever, other products. So yeah, that's another change that we've sort of been discussing this past week.
Pretty awesome. I just heard about it too, and I'll just double up on it. It's an awesome, intuitive, and it does so much. It makes the UI feel so much better, and I think that just makes the game make a lot more sense from the point of view of like it's kind of, Chris was explaining it to me as kind of a specialization cost for a factory, right? So you have your factory, you want to turn it into an aluminum sheet making factory. The idea is, you pay the retooling costs is what it was. You pay the retooling cost once to make it into a specialized factory, and then you could just keep producing aluminum sheets from that factory for as long as you need to. It'll be specialized for that until you decide to switch it up by paying another cost.
And one interesting possibility that this actually raised for us was that, you might actually see asteroid slippers, people who come along and they buy an asteroid and they build a bunch of buildings on it, but they don't specialize them. So here's a bunch of factories, here's a bunch of refineries, but they're all the generic, non-specialized version. And then they sell that asteroid and it's been sort of improved. It's got that infrastructure on it. And, you can take it and specialize all the buildings however you want, when you buy it. But you don't have to go through all the basic building of the buildings yourself. I think that might be an interesting little niche for people. And this change kind of makes that easier.
Yeah, I was actually thinking, I think that works as well, but there's also the opposite where, it might be very difficult to make particular, specializations for your buildings. And so you are, taking it upon yourself as maybe an engineer and or scientist to produce these efficiently, and you have all the materials, you upgrade your buildings, and then you actually lease out those lots of land that already have those particular buildings on it, so that people can produce those things, without having to go through the hassle of building all of that themselves.
Absolutely, there are a lot of implications here for how the economy might handle this. But yeah, I think we're going to still continue calling them process modules probably, but what that means now is just a set of materials that you need to specialize a building.
I see a question about crewmates being split. I think you got your answer here, but yeah, you can have as many crewmates in your wallet as you'd like. It's just you can only have 5 loaded in at once. If you want to have another crew, you'll just have to send it to another address where that can be managed separately. The cool thing about addresses is that you can have as many addresses in a single wallet as you'd like, and it's all secured by either the same seed phrase or, if you're using Argent or Argent X, you're likely going to have social recovery on those addresses. So it makes gameplay pretty seamless. Because all you have to do in reality is, if you want to go use your, let's say, fifth crew, because you're running 5 crews because you're insane and you want to have lots of space in this game, you just click the address in your wallet and all of a sudden you're now playing as that crew. So you're basically just clicking one button to switch to your other crew at any given time, and it's going to feel pretty easy to do for you. I don't think it's going to take away from any of the experience or take you out of you playing the game. It's all built in.
Maybe it looks like Naftrax has a question about when the next asteroid sale might be. I don't think I can probably give a good answer for that one.
Yeah. So for the next asteroid sales, we just don't have a date right now. We wanted to do it way long ago. We had planned to do it, but with StarkNet being the way that it is right now and us having to wait till November for certain things, we're not sure exactly when a asteroid sale will take place, but we'll give you guys plenty of heads up when that does happen. I want to make sure that the community who's been here and has either not been able to purchase an asteroid or simply just wants to own more asteroids is the first to know. You guys will be definitely the first to know. So sorry, no direct answer there for that. I'm not trying to be a politician that skirts around the answer. We just honestly don't have a date for that at this time.
Cool. So also Naftrax has a question, any details on the asteroid resource heat map? Maybe C-types have more methane than I-types, for example. Good question. I think Chris has been actually, deep in the weeds on this one the past couple of weeks, and I think he's wrapped up on the specific thing that we needed for that, which is what's called simplex noise. It's basically an implementation of noise on a 2 or 3D sort of within a space, within a volume. And specifically in this case, it's 3D simplex noise. So there's basically a volume within which a number can be made to sort of vary in a kind of noisy, grainy, but also smoothly varying, like clouds almost, made to vary in that way. What we're going to do is we're going to sample from that 3D distribution based on the 3D location of each plot or lot on the asteroid surface. So it's basically like a spherical shell of this 3D simplex noise that will be sampled onto the asteroid surface for each resource that is available on that asteroid spectral type. So that will then, in each lot, we'll take that simplex noise and normalize it versus all the other resources that are available on that asteroid, and that will then determine the distribution of raw resources on that lot. And so when you go prospecting, you'll head around, and I think you actually will have access to these maps. You'll be able to see these maps, just as a guide. Like, it won't be like it's hidden and you have to prospect to find it. That would be an awesome mechanic, but we can't really do it unless we had like some sort of complicated ZK-proof way of doing it, which is kind of outside the scope right now. So you'll be able to see the resource distribution maps right away and head straight to the spots where the most dense concentrations of resources are and set up your mines there or do your drill your core samples there and try to find some even especially juicy deposits in those locations. And as far as C-types versus I-types, the different spectral types have different base, sort of distributions of the raw material types. And that is something that we will balance. We've had the very rough sort of numbers that you guys have already seen in terms of just the sort of bar chart. But we're going to balance that a little bit more specifically so that I think I types will probably have more methane than C types, but I can't confirm that right now. But that will determine the average for all that spectral type of all asteroids of that spectral type, how much of that resource they have. And then each asteroid will have its own sort of tweaks to those numbers. So like your own particular asteroid, it might be like a C type, and maybe that particular asteroid actually does in fact have a lot more methane than say water, more so than the average C type might have. And that will actually be a scalar which multiplies the simplex noise for those different particular resources before it gets normalized. So that means that you will wind up with more of that resource on average across your asteroid. So again, this is something I'm actually really excited about. The fact that this is something we haven't, those numbers haven't been calculated yet. but they will be once we've designed that algorithm. That each of your asteroids will have its own abundances of resources beyond just the spectral type. So you may be sitting on a literal gold mine, or a literal water mine, or your asteroid will definitely have certain things that it is heavier in, even beyond its boost, even beyond its spectral type, than you would expect. And that will definitely make some really interesting decisions in terms of value for asteroids.
Yeah,
It is really really cool.
it's pretty
I'll just add
mind-blowing.
that I hope that it we can layer that in possibly sooner ahead of other exploitation features, just because it's a core property of the asteroids, and it's algorithmically driven, and it's a really really cool visual that even before we get other game mechanics up and running, hopefully you guys will be able to preview it, or at least get a taste and get a chance to see that heat map for yourselves, at least spin around the asteroid, see where various things are located.
Absolutely. I mean, we have the Cairo contract now that can do that, so I think that is not too far off for sure. And basically the way it works is that we have a smart contract on Cairo that implements that simplex noise, and so that's sort of the ultimate source of truth for what the distribution of stuff on the asteroid surface is. But we're not going to be pinging that contract 1,000 times to figure out all the different distributions of things on each lot. Like when you're showing it in the client, the client will have that same algorithm in it, just in JavaScript, and can run that super fast and show you the beautiful map in full detail.
Yeah, I think it's pretty crazy to think about too, because it's not easy to understand our land. From a brand new participant coming into this game, trying to figure out what do asteroids mean, what do these boosts mean, what are the materials I can find. There's a lot of nuance here, and adding that simplex noise and that heat map essentially creates a whole nother level of in my opinion, just amazing, a cool factor on it. But it is, another layer of complexity. But for people who love to look at asteroids and are kind of merchants by trade, they're going to be able to identify, I think, asteroids that have already been scanned that have really good boosts, or maybe not great boosts, but because of the resource composition, they can basically find value, a diamond in the rough, as some might say. And I'm just super excited. Sergey, I agree. If we can have a toggle button, turn on, turn off for that heat map before launch, that would be incredibly exciting, I think, for all players to be able to go in, look at their asteroid, have it scanned, and then hit that button to all of a sudden see the heat map. That's just another level of holy crap, look at this game, look what it's doing.
Absolutely. Darius has a question about once a building is specialized, it doesn't have a limited number of uses. That's correct now. And will there be any kind of upkeep? I think we're going to let wait until the maintenance release. Yes, I think that's correct. Right at exploitation launch, that building will be good to go for basically forever, until the maintenance release comes out, and we add a degree of upgrade, which will require you to come through and patch up buildings with certain materials on some sort of regular basis. Looks like Romega has
your factory components will begin to wear down. So we plan at some point, to do all wear and tear. But it's the cost of installing those specialized factory components is what the new cost of the module will be.
So I see a question. It's a big one. Romega, is there anything we need to do in order to be ready for the next test to earn? Yes, there absolutely is. I highly recommend, if you do not already, set up an Argent X wallet. It's super easy, super fast. You set it up just like any other wallet if you've got MetaMask or things like that, and you're pretty much ready to go, other than acquiring some Gorley ETH. Gorley ETH on StarkNet. So this is a big difference than Gorley ETH on L1. You need it on StarkNet. Now you can simply go and Google StarkNet testnet ETH, and you'll come up with StarkNet's faucet. You don't get much ETH from that. I think it's 0.05 or maybe less than that every time you do it, and I think there's a 24-hour hold on it. So you can bridge ETH over, though. StarkNet does provide a Goerli testnet bridge where you can take your Go ETH from L1 and put it onto L2. And there are lots of faucets that can be found to get Go ETH on L1 still, not many on L2 yet. So if you would like to participate in a more grand way, mint lots of asteroids, bridge lots of things, if you've participated in this last test to earn phase and you're going to be bridging things from L1 to L2, highly recommend just accumulating a bit of it now. We do have kind of a war chest of it because everyone who bought asteroids from this last phase, we have that Go ETH. We will be providing some services to be able to just say, hey, I need some, and we'll provide that. Likely it's going to be manual. I'm going to do it where, maybe once a day, I just say, put your address on this list, and I will send you some Go ETH when I can that day. It won't be as immediate as you being able to just go ahead and grab some yourself on one of the many faucets that exist now. So Argent, X Wallet, Go ETH on StarkNet. You have those two things, you're ready to go. Other than that, it's pretty simple, self-explanatory in what you want to do. You're going to participate. You're going to go into the game. You're going to click some things. You're going to do the things that I have outlined in the announcement. Now, I will provide a guide. I will likely create a video that has all the steps to doing each one of these things, such as bridging and minting an asteroid and using the Adalian crew screens and things like that. But ultimately, if you just want to have some fun, the main things you need, Argent X Wallet, some Go ETH. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Cool. Mathrax has a good question. So the simplex noise variances could have a bigger impact than asteroid bonuses since they're added at the bottom before core samples. It really depends on how we scaled the simplex noise before we normalize it. If we make it so that it has a gigantic magnitude and then normalize it, then sometimes you'll have places where it's like 100% hydrogen or 100% tainite or whatever. I think we kind of want to try to avoid that. We don't want to have like just this insanely highly varied surface of these asteroids. We want it to be a pretty typical asteroid that's made of more or less the same stuff in more or less most places. We might, now that I think about it, it might actually make sense to apply a little bit of an exponential boost to that so that, most places are pretty similar, but there are some sharp peaks here and there. Like you might just randomly find like a super high concentration of this or that in a small area. That might be pretty fun. But it just depends on how we actually, set the magnitude of that simplex noise. And then Olmaps has a question, will heat maps and asteroid-specific variances be visible before purchasing or scanning an asteroid? I think the answer to that is yes, because it makes a difference. Obviously, if we had that information before the previous sales, we would have. Well, to be clear, the heat maps, I think yes. I think the heat maps, yes, will be visible. The asteroid-specific variances may actually be part of the random roll that you do when you scan it. We may use that same source of randomness to compute that. Because otherwise, like it becomes a free for all just to buy all the ones that with the best different variances. Like I should note though that the variances are they will always add up to 1 too. Like it's not like some asteroid will just add 3 times as much as the others. That's the boost that we already have is the sort of how fast do you get that resource off of that asteroid, and so that's already settled. There's no more addition, changes to this. Everything I've been talking about here is all normalized to 1, so it's just some resources being denser in certain places than others, but you always get the same amount in total of the resources. But yes, I think the asteroid specific bulk composition will be probably tied to the scan that you have done on that asteroid, and the heat maps will probably be something that's just generated from the asteroid ID and visible before you purchase it.
And I'm assuming that some of our community developers will almost instantly take that data, put it into a thing where you could put in like, I'm looking for asteroid with, a normalized value of 0.7 or higher of X material in areas, and all of a sudden it's going to populate those asteroids into maybe a shopping list or something like that. I'm sure you guys are going to get creative with it, but all of those things will be there for you to do whatever you would like with that information.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think it's a great point that getting this algorithm figured out for how resources are weighted. When you drill, for example, when you buy an asteroid at all these key junctures, like we do need to have that pretty soon. I think the next big thing after the whole bridging stuff that Chris is thinking about is the orbital travel between asteroids. I think that's sort of the next big dev task on this plate, but I kind of suspect that the resource abundances and mining and that kind of stuff may be the next big thing after that. So certainly coming down the pipeway pretty soon here.
Yep, I've heard him confirm those thoughts a few times. Travel is the next big thing. Then it's going to be lot interaction and resource availability and simplex noise being put into heat map. Like those are kind of two big pieces. Once we have those two in the test net, I mean, you're going to be able to travel around in a ship, gas free still, but it's going to feel very much like a game at that point. And then we have the follow up of inventory systems and buildings and marketplaces, and those will definitely take some additional time because they are kind of interconnected with every other piece in the game and have to be battle tested like no other. But again, you guys are all here. You get to be part of those test to earn events, and we're really excited for everyone to take part in those. It's really important to us to have these things battle tested, and we have dedicated a pretty significant amount of that initial supply of sway for people to test. 1% of our entire initial distribution may not sound like a lot, but it's quite large, and I think people who really do dive into these test nets and test all these features as much as they can are going to feel pretty well rewarded on day one of playing the game and be able to have that leg up. And I think you should, because you've helped us get here. So yeah, thank you, everyone. I'm looking here to see if there's any additional questions. Again, you can always raise your hand and come up on stage if you'd like. I know our group typically does not have many people who want to come up on stage. Okay, so question: how do we plan on balancing pure types and multispectral types with the simplex noise? Proto, you might be better handled to answer this.
Yeah, sure. I mean, normalization is normalization. It works on any asteroid type. So what I mean by normalization is, say you have simplex noise, which at a particular lot produces, say for, let's just say there are only three resources. There's water and, hydrogen and carbon dioxide. It would produce three different numbers, and say water comes up as a 0.6 and carbon dioxide comes up as a 0.1 and and hydrogen comes up as a 0.7. Like if you add those all together, like that's more than one. There's more there than than what there should be. But by normalizing it, you'd add those all together, and what is that? Like 1.4. So you divide all those by 1.4, and that gives you the actual normalized value at that point. And those are then the concentrations of those, the respective. Basically, like if you picked up a piece of the asteroid at that specific location, an average piece of the asteroid at that specific location, it would be made of whatever percentages of those of those different raw materials, and that goes directly into how the mine works. You get a certain amount of the extractor is able to extract a certain amount of material per unit of time, and that will be of a particular fraction of the target resource that you're mining, and you'll get that fraction out of it. So if it's a high density, then you'll get more per unit time, and if it's a low density, you'll get less per unit time, and that applies across all the different asteroid types, including pure types and multispectral asteroids. So what that really means, again, as we've said before, is that on a multispectral asteroid, you have the bonus of having access to a lot more different resource types, raw material types on that asteroid. But that comes at a cost, which is that on your average lot, and again, there will be lots where one material does dominate, even on multispectral asteroids. But that means on your average lot, the concentration of every raw material will be lower on average. So you set up your mine and you're just throwing away all these other materials that aren't relevant to what you're mining. So you'll really, on a multispectral asteroid, have to look more carefully for the the hot spots, the spots that really have those high densities, to speed up your mining process. Again, everything's a trade-off, and that's why multispectral might be a great spot for a base, because you don't need to travel as much, but it's also maybe less of a good spot for a top of the line and high speed mine for absolutely everything. There may be a pure type might be a better choice for that. But again, on any asteroid, you'll be able to find hot spots for particular things because of the simplex noise.
Well, I don't see any additional questions at this time. I don't see anyone typing any new questions. So if we don't have any more questions, I think we'll probably end this call for the day. Sergey, Proto, do you have anything that you wanted to cover before we closed out?
I've got a fun science one to lob at Proto to close this out. Which is, Proto, can you explain why? So we're going to have gold, we're going to have silver, we're going to have a lot of common minerals that people typically expect to be able to mine right out of an asteroid, like they have on Earth, gold mines here. But why can't you do that in Influence? And I just learned this because I was just diving into the production chains and seeing that gold is like second stage.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get gold in Influence? Can you explain?
Sure. Yeah, in real life, in a gold mine, what you do is you basically mine your gold ore, whatever, there's various different minerals that are gold bearing. And the most common way of doing it is actually you lay out this plastic sheet in a big area, like in a sort of dug out area, and you pile all of your ore on top of it, and then you pour various acids or arsenic on top of it. And you do it's what's called a leach field, where basically you wait for a long time, and the chemical goes through and it dissolves all that gold out of the ore, and then it goes to the bottom and accumulates on the plastic sheet. And if you've sort of shaped it right, it'll flow into collecting areas, and then you can get out the gold from that concentrate, from that leachate, which is what it's called. Obviously, in space on asteroids, there's not much gravity, so you really can't do that like on any easy bulk scale. So what we've got for gold and silver specifically in Influence in the production chains is they come they're in with the lead basically. So we've got troilite, which is one of the M-type raw resources. And that produces various sulfides. So we've got iron sulfide, lead sulfide, tin sulfide, and molybdenum disulfide, which all come from troilite. There's this centrifugal froth flotation process that you can do, which basically, you grind it up really small, and then it use some sort of enhanced gravity in a centrifuge, which we've got in the refinery, to separate it out those different sulfides by density. And so you get lead sulfide from that. And then from lead sulfide, this is true in real life, in reality too, is that, gold and other sort of rare minerals tend to be sort of in with the lead often. And so you take that lead sulfide and you actually can put it through this process where you basically calcine it. So you've got this little bone ash crucible. This is how you do it in real life, is you've got a little crucible and you put the sulfide in it, and you can sort of fire it up, and the lead oxidizes, so it turns into lead oxide, and that gets absorbed by the bone ash, which is like, I think, a potassium chloride or something. But yeah, so then that absorbs the lead oxide, and then you're left with the rare precious minerals like gold and silver. And so that part is still fairly applicable to space. We can do that in any of the refinery modules that are able to sort of heat things up, and so that's pretty much how we do it. But yeah, we can't do the leach fields like we do in real life. So it goes through a different process through centrifugal froth flotation in our centrifuge.
Yay, science! You want gold and Influence? You got to mine troilite, which is awesome and very scientifically accurate.
God, I love talking about this game.
We can go into that in a little detail for literally everything in this production chain. There's so much there.
Yeah, I think Proto, in the future, we will absolutely have to have a weekly production chain chat where we dive into maybe like a particular interesting material or what is created from particular chains. Because the more that we talk about it, I think the more that I get excited, and I hope that means the community itself is also excited about it. And not to say that we won't also talk about all the other game mechanics and things that are happening in development and when this game will launch. But we're a bunch of science nerds, and we love it, and I think we want to continue to build community around that core of our love for gaming, our love for science, our love for blockchain, and try and build a really, really quality community around that. So anyways, everyone, thank you for being here. We have another event next week take a look at our events listed. I have it there already. It should be a lot of fun. I have a member from the Bays team who used to work for TikTok and led their community or their community building. And I think it's just going to be a really fun conversation about how do you take building communities to blockchain, and what is the difference between building a community in the traditional Web 2 world versus now the Web 3, and bringing in gaming and things like that to it. So RSVP to that, and have a great day. So talk to you guys later, and if you have more questions, just ping me, and I'm happy to answer you guys after this call.
Cheers, everyone.
Bye. See you, everyone.